Let's go ahead and look at some of the chat stuff here. Nancy says that in the spirit of small steps, I've been working on increasing the servings of vegetables. I'm up to 8 servings per day, but I am so full that I can hardly get any protein. Does anyone else have problems eating the sheer volume of food? Nancy, that's a great question and a great point, and I want to congratulate you on up to 8 servings per day. And isn't it amazing how you can you are fooling yourself into better health and lasting fat loss, right? Throughout your life, I would imagine if, for example, you've ever tried something like Weight Watchers or any other calorie counting program, it was almost like if you're not hungry, you're doing something wrong. I've heard from so many people that hunger has almost been worn as a badge of honor in the past, and that breaks my heart so much because we know that hunger isn't healthy, and we know that starvation can't lead to anything positive now that we've gone sane. But just taking a step back, I mean, it's awesome that you're up to 8 servings of vegetables per day. And can we just celebrate for a moment that you eating so much nutrient-dense, non-starchy vegetables that you are so full that you're like, I can't eat this much food. I mean, let's just celebrate that for a second. So that's awesome. But to answer your question of how do I get to the sheer volume of food prescribed in, for example, the SANE planner or any of the SANE step-by-step courses. And again, the general rule of thumb, if folks are taking notes, which is always maybe a good idea during these sessions, is for non-starchy vegetables, we're looking for anywhere from 8 to 16 servings of non-starchy vegetables. You can eat all the non-starchy vegetables you want. You'll get uncomfortable before you overdo it with non-starchy vegetables, as Nancy's shown here. So you want to go anywhere between 8 and 16 servings of non-starchy vegetables. You want to go between 3 and 6 servings of nutrient-dense protein. And again, the serving of nutrient-dense protein is generally between 20 and 40, depending on the size of your body, grams of protein, and it's generally the size of your palm. And anywhere between 2 and 6 servings of whole food fats. And to answer your question, Nancy, we say, okay, well, and then, there's some low fructose fruits there, but those are non-essential. The question here is, what do I do when I'm too full to eat all that? I don't think there is 2 essential components of a sane lifestyle when it comes to eating. One is the non-starchy vegetables, meaning that they're sort of, if you want results, which I think we all do, the sort of non-starchy vegetables are non-negotiable. Certainly you don't have to eat 8 to 16 servings of them, but that's like priority number 1 if you want results. Priority number 2 is you do need to try to get to, if at a bare minimum, 3 20 to 30 gram servings of protein per day. And there are ways we can do that if you're too full for that. But if you don't do that, then either you are going to only be consuming like 200 calories per day, because 8 servings of vegetables, or vegetables are not caloric. They're nutrients. They're basically fiber, water, and essential nutrients. So there's no calories there. You do need some calories. So you're either going to get your calories then from protein or your whole food fats. Now, the whole food fats is definitely that's the one that's going to be the most malleable. So if you are like the incredibly fit 55-year-old family member who is at like 13% body fat already and doing CrossFit 3 or 4 times per week, that person definitely needs to eat the upper end of whole food fats. So like 6 servings of whole food fats per day, simply because they don't have any calories in their body to burn off, really. Because 13% body fat, I don't know if this is a man or a woman. If this is a woman, 13% body fat is actually it's quite low. One's menstrual cycle would probably stop if that's a female at 13% body fat. As a male, that's fine. If your goal as a male is to physically see your abdominal muscles, that usually happens around 10% body fat. So I could see if that was this individual's goal, that they're going for that. But anyway, the less fat you have, the more fat you need to eat, simply because you need calories. But when, to your question, if you're too full, what you want to do is you want to look at anything else you're eating, and you want to focus on that which is essential to the SANE lifestyle. So non-starchy vegetables, essential, 330 or so grams of protein, essential. If you're too full for that, we can try to find liquid sources of protein, because the liquid calories are really easy to eat. That's why you generally don't want to eat liquid calories, with the exception of green smoothies, which aren't really liquid calories because they're primarily vegetables. So what they're really is liquid nutrients, water, and fiber. So certainly they have some calories in them, but you're going to get, I mean, just the sheer number of calories you'll burn, as you know, hopefully, based on the inefficiency of fiber and protein, the E in SANE, the number of calories you burn simply digesting protein and trying to digest fiber is oftentimes going to almost cancel out the actual amount of calories you're consuming when it comes to fiber and protein. But anyway, so you're looking for at least 90 grams of protein. So if you need to go liquid, you can with a clean whey protein, a clean rice or pea or hemp protein. I would prefer, whey is going to be the most pure and complete and biologically available of those proteins. Pea would be next. And just in the spirit of cutting edge science, while we're on these calls, I use the term there called biological availability. This is not something we've talked about before. And I know we got some questions about, I want some cutting edge science. So this isn't so much cutting edge as it is little known. So as you probably can guess by now, just like a calorie isn't a calorie, protein isn't protein. So 1 gram of protein is not the same depending on where it comes from. This is what we're learning about nutrition. It's not everything's the same. So a gram of protein from whey, for example, has what's called whey is almost, it has like a perfect biological availability, which means the body can take, if you were to eat 30 grams of whey protein, basically all 30 grams of that is going to be metabolized and used by your body. It's more biologically available. Whereas if you were to eat 30 grams worth of protein from, say, peanuts, that has a biological availability that's much lower. I think legumes are at like 50 to 60%. So this is sometimes a challenge for vegans and it's not a challenge for vegans because vegans can eat fish. It's a challenge, vegetarians, because vegetarians can eat fish. But for vegans, if there's no animal food at all, it is a scientific fact that unfortunately the protein in plants has a lower biological availability than the protein that's found in animals. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad. This is not a judgment. This is just a scientific fact. Just like we say, it's a scientific fact that spinach contains more nutrients per calories than apples do. No judgment. It's just a fact. No judgment, but the biological availability of animal sources of protein is higher than the biological availability of plant sources of protein. So that's just also something to keep in mind when you are consuming, for example, like clean pea protein, is that 30 grams of clean pea protein, not all 30 of those grams are going to be usable by your body. And this doesn't just apply. So I'm going to get deep here for a second because I've got some questions where people are like, I want to know some more advanced stuff. So hopefully this is helpful. Just like we say, protein isn't protein. So hopefully what I just said is helpful. If you have follow-up questions, please let me know. Eggs are a super biological available source of protein. Egg whites, actually, egg whites used to be considered the standard. It was like biological availability, egg whites are 100, and then whey actually exceeded that, which I don't really know how that works, but that's for another call. But the same thing applies for fats. Now, what I mean by this is, for example, omega-3 fatty acids. So we're going to get advanced here, but that's why we're here on these sessions together. So there are 3 forms commonly sort of consumed of omega-3 fatty acids. And the reason I'm highlighting omega-3 fatty acids is because they're incredibly difficult to get. Unless you try to eat omega-3 fatty acids, you will not. It's just, they're not in most foods people eat. And they are so good for you. I mean, you can literally get a prescription. Psychiatrists can write you a prescription for omega-3 fatty acids because they're so essential for neurological function. Anyway, there are 3 primary forms of omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, DHA, and ALA. Complicated names, but the EPA and DHA are the kinds that are found in fish. So they are found in animal sources. So you're looking at basically fish. That's where you're going to find them. Fatty sources of fish. Cod liver oil is a great concentrated source. And then for when it comes to plants, so if you look at chia seeds and flax seeds, you will see, oh my goodness, like they have so many omega-3s in them, and they do, and they're great. The thing to keep in mind though, is that the omega-3s that you find in chia seeds, which again, chia seeds rock, they are an optimal whole food fat. But if you don't know what I'm about to tell you, you might say, hey, why would I ever eat fish or salmon? Because when I eat 100 calories of salmon, I only get X grams of omega-3s. But when I eat 100 calories of chia seeds, I get like X times 3. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's in the ballpark. I get X times 3 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. Well, the thing, so you'd be like, oh, I'm never going to eat fish. I'm only ever going to eat chia seeds. But here's the key distinction. The form of omega-3 fats that are found in plants is ALA, or alpha linoleic acid, which is not sort of native to the human body. So what happens is when you eat alpha linoleic acid or the omega-3 fats found in plants, your body actually has to convert it into the other forms. And that conversion process is very inefficient. So we don't have exact numbers for it, but there are estimates to that, like anywhere from, like it could be as inefficient as like only 10% of it actually gets converted up, or it could be like 50%. But point is that like a good chunk of it is gonna get not used by your body. So that's why it's just important to know not only I mean, hopefully the quality of what you eat matters a lot. So it might seem somewhat strange, for example, if you're like, why do I recommend like eating oysters? That's strange. Why not just eat cod for protein? Well, it's because there's like a bunch of other complicated science that goes into this. So some of the recommendations factor those things in. And so the net takeaway here, I guess, is that if you cannot eat all the food recommended, what you want to do is you want to focus on the most biologically available, as well as the most nutrient dense sources of foods. And this is also the recommendation that you'll hear given to people that have gastric surgeries, because their stomach is shrunk, and because their stomach is shrunk, they actually can't eat a high volume of food. So it's extremely important that the food they eat is not only nutrient dense, but that those nutrients can be metabolized, right? So if you can't fit food into your stomach, either because you're too full or because your stomach has been surgically shrunk, the answer to both of those questions is the same, which is we have to focus on ensuring a maximal nutrient density for the calories we are eating. So that's why the non-starchy vegetables are non-negotiable. That's why the approximately at least 30 gram servings of protein from, if possible, if your lifestyle allows for it, healthy nutrient dense animal sources are ideal. If you can't do animal sources, you can do a amino acid supplement and just make sure you're getting the branch chain amino acids in there. So leucine, valine, isoleucine. Talk more about that later. It's super science at this point. And then when it comes to your fats, you'd want to focus on the most nutrient dense fats in the world. So these are going to be your medium and short chain fatty acids. These are primarily found in coconut. You're going to want to focus on your pure monounsaturated fats. So think olives, think avocados, think macadamia nuts. Avocados are extremely high in fiber, so those are going to be very, very filling. And then also think your very concentrated omega-3s. So maybe some of that protein you're getting, if you're too full, is definitely going to come from omega-3 rich sources of protein. So think fatty fish like salmon, and or mollusks, or things like clams and oysters. And by the way, if you're not eating oysters, if you can buy them. If you can buy them canned on Amazon or anywhere else, super affordable. And you can use them just like you'd use chicken, in the sense that chicken by itself is disgusting. Like if you just took a chicken breast and boiled it, it would be horrible. But chicken takes on the flavor of what you put it in. The same thing applies to mollusks. So things like oysters and clams, you're like, what in the heck do I do with oysters and clams? Well, first of all, you can buy them canned, so they're super affordable, and they are extremely nutrient dense, and they're full of nutrients that are very hard to find anywhere else, like zinc, for example, which is super important to hormone production and to balancing your hormones out. So to answer your question, if you can't eat the volume of food, that's okay. Just make sure you're getting in the vegetables, the protein, and the fats from those concentrated sources. Hopefully that answers your question. And that is probably way more information than you wanted to know. But let me go ahead and take a look at the chat here real quick. Hopefully that was helpful. All right, let's go here real quick. Oh, Holly's got sound. Holly's got sound. All right, cool. That's excellent news. All right, so I'm happy to hear that Holly's got the sound. Laura's full at 8.2. I love that. That is all good. Actually, hey, and let's talk about vegetable nutrient density for a second, because not all vegetables are created equal. So you'll actually notice this. I think it's in the SANE 101 course. It might be lesson 1 of SANE 101. There's a 7 days of SANE or SANE quick start guide. And there's within each food group. All right, we're going to do some, give me some feedback if we're going too advanced here, but I got some feedback that people kind of want advanced stuff here because the less advanced stuff is already available on the website. So I'm going to be advanced and crazy. So we actually had a big debate about this internally with the app. With the app, you notice that you can tag food groups. So we had a big debate a long time ago about whether we would create sort of you get bonus points within each food group if you pick one of the optimal sources. And you can see these optimal sources in that lesson that I referred to earlier. What I mean by that is just like I talked about, for example, oysters and clams when it comes to protein and things like liver. But yeah, it's really good for you. It's so good for you. Your mother was right when she said liver and cod liver oil. You know, it's like, oh, grandma was super, super right. And what's cool is because the reason grandma was right was because grandma based her life on what worked and what worked for generations, not what some crazy person on television told her to do or what she read in a magazine that didn't really have her best interests in mind. Grandma was brilliant because grandma lived her life based on what worked and what worked for her mother and what worked for her mother's mother and what worked for her mother's mother's mother. And the further we've gotten away from that sort of, if it works, keep doing it, like that's the rule, not, oh, well, you know, this expert said that I should do this. And, you know, it's made me depressed and miserable and I hate myself and I have an eating disorder, but this professional says that I should do it. So I must be wrong because they can't possibly be wrong. Like that is so insane. Not a criticism, but it's like insane that our culture has shifted our mindset in that way, right? If healthy should feel great, right? The opposite of health is sickness and no one likes sickness. So if healthy is making us feel bad, we need to get back to the way grandma thought, because grandma was not only right scientifically, but pragmatically, she was spot on because she based her decisions on what works. And that's what matters, what works. What in the heck am I talking about? Where did I start off? Oh, optimal food groups. Okay. So optimal vegetables. So there is definitely a difference in terms of vegetables. Things that are green leafy vegetables, for example, like romaine lettuce is great, but it is nowhere near as good for us as things like a kale or a Swiss chard or a bok choy or an arugula or some of these more, let's call them less well-known green vegetables. So man, I like the deeper the green of the vegetable, like mustard greens, collard greens, these things chard are so, I mean, a serving of Swiss chard is nutritionally and hormonally healthfully equivalent, literally, to, I don't know, like 5 servings of carrots. I mean, like carrots will have more of that vitamin A, but from an overall nutritional density perspective, these optimal vegetables, optimal protein, nutrient dense protein, optimal whole food fats, and even optimal fruits. I mean, when it comes to a fruits perspective, there's a huge difference in fruits. And I think we all know this, right? We've heard of things like acai berries and goji berries and noni fruit And while, of course, that's gotten a little, excuse my language, bastardized by some of these people who peddle these magical serums for $85 a bottle, they've taken the truth and they've warped it. But the truth is, like, acai is not you. If an acai berry got in a fight with an apple, like, the acai berry would kick the apple's acai. Let's put it that way. Let's put it that way, okay? Just in terms of sanity and nutrient density. So if you really want to start to take stuff to the next level, you definitely want to check out that lesson in, I believe it's in the SANE 101 course. And if you can, focus on the optimal food groups. But again, you know, with all this advanced stuff, it's very easy to say, like, oh, there's so much I have to do, and I'm failing, and I'm not eating the optimal food groups, right? What's more important than any of that, right? Like, being stressed out, being stressed and eating 4 servings of optimal vegetables is worse for you than being happy and calm and proud and eating 1 serving of conventional non-starchy vegetables, right? Like, we are here, like, results, we're after results, and feeling great is the result we're after, right? Be performing at our best, loving our lives, loving ourselves, having that sense of purpose and passion and energy. So if anything that we talk about here does not make you feel that way, stop. And maybe get to it later. It'll still be there, right? You'll still be here. SANE will still be here. I'll still be here. The entire loving SANE family will still be here for you. Okay. These are things you don't have to do right now. They're things that you can do eventually. And that's actually kind of cool, because you know that, you know, it's not like, oh, I've tried everything. There's way more stuff to try and to enjoy in the future. But just like if you're not able to play chopsticks fluently on the piano yet, playing like a Bach concerto is probably going to do more harm than good, because you'd be like, oh, I'm terrible at the piano. But you're not terrible at the piano. You've been playing the piano for 2 weeks and you can play chopsticks pretty well. And that's awesome, right? We'll get to that concerto in a little bit. So hopefully that made sense. I think it kind of did. Let me see a little bit on the chat here. All right. Non-starchy vegetables. Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of good stuff here. Serving size of veggies. Oh, I love it. Sherry, great question. And thank you so much, everyone, for we're getting questions answered by our fellow family members, which is awesome. So this is great. Holly is in the house and she's got her audio, which is great. And she needs a massive help with is kicking a processed sugar habit. So Holly, I know you're not alone with that. A lot of people are going to struggle with the processed sugar. I think what will be helpful for this conversation is you're having trouble with emotional eating? Are you having trouble with, I just crave the taste of sweets? I want to sort of dig into that a little bit, because if, for example, the issue is with, I have a hard time giving up sweets, I don't want you to give up sweets. Like, if we had to give up sweets, I would quit, because I eat sweet. I think we have sweet taste buds on our tongue for a reason, and there's nothing wrong with sweets as long as we eat sane sources of sweets. And we covered this in a huge amount of detail in a couple calls, so there's a great recording in there. So feel free to jump in the chat box. Let us know a little bit more if it's like actually processed sugar, like you've eaten things with honey and it doesn't do it, like you need processed sugar, or if it's sweet, or if it's emotional eating, and we'll dig into that for sure. And then let's see here. The process, know what I'm going to deal with weight management. Hard for me to keep processing the forefront when I'm used to weight. Yeah. So Laura, you're exactly right. So Laura makes a great point here. She says, I think the process is such a new way for us to deal with weight management, because we've been so focused on the results. And we've been done such a disservice. It's heartbreaking. Right? I mean, like in a Weight Watchers type program, there's things like public weigh-ins, and we see this on television, where the focus is not on, it's on anything but the process. It's on the opposite. It's only on the results. And because of that, this is why, unfortunately, people develop eating disorders and people end up taking stimulants, which, like, in that case, the process is horribly unhealthy. The process is horribly unsustainable. The process is actually killing us, but the results are good. And this is, again, I mean, like, there are all sorts of toxic, evil processes we could engage in to make a living, right? Like, so if the results are all that matter, if making money, the result, my bank account balance is all that matters, I think we can all agree that if we're like, it's not about the process, it's only about the results, I think we know what happens, right? Like, in those type of contexts, people do some pretty bad stuff. And the same thing applies to health, right? If the focus is on just what the scale says, stop drinking water, right? That you're gonna lose a whole lot of weight really fast if you just stop drinking water. But unfortunately, you'll die if you don't drink water. So that's why the process is just so important. And it is a huge mental change, but that's why we're here on these sessions. That's why it's so important to get into the SANE support group and post something, even if it's just a gratitude journal. Like, that is so helpful. And just like every single day, we're going to hear insane nonsense. It's not going to go away, at least not for a generation or so. We're going to continue to hear things like low calorie snack packs, and this only has 100 calories in it, and blah, 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 blah. So the goal, like, that stuff's not going to go away. We have to almost immunize ourselves with it, and we have to crowd it out. That's why, you know, the Ignite program has a huge amount of stuff in it, but that's intentional, because I want you to feel like you're filling your body with so much sane food that you're too full for insane nonsense. We have to try as best as we can to fill our brain with so much sane information that it helps to crowd out that nonsense. So it's a kind of a good rule of thumb in general. My mother once told me, and it stuck with me my whole life, Jonathan, there's just too much good in the world. You know, this is like when I was a teenager, and I was doing some less than optimal things that people sometimes do when they're teenagers. She's just like, Jonathan, there's so much good in the world. Like, why not focus on so much good that there's no room for the bad? Or at least it's been helpful for me. So hopefully that helps a bit. Let me just jump into some of these questions here real quick that have come in over not chat. So this individual broke their foot, which is not so good. And they've been on the part of the Ignite family for about a month. They're very pleased with the results, which is awesome. They broke their foot. What eccentric exercises can I do with a broken foot? Yeah, so 2 things of good news. Obviously, breaking your foot is no fun. Actually, 3 things good news, even though you broke your foot. So 1, eccentric exercise is the safest form of exercise in the entire world. Not a lot of people know this, but here is my current state of physical health, okay? I have a torn labrum, which is kind of like a meniscal disc in this shoulder. So I have a tear here. This pec, you can't see it, but I tore it like many years ago doing non-eccentric weight training. So there's like a part of my pec just doesn't connect to my shoulder anymore. I've torn my right hip flexor and my right knee. So you have ACL, MCL, PCL ligaments. My ACL has been torn 3 times, and I didn't get the 3rd surgery. So I have not had an ACL ligament. So if someone says I tore my ACL, I have been in that state for the past 12 years. I also don't have a meniscal disc. You have 2 meniscal discs on either side of your knee, sort of one here and one here. I don't have this one. These are from old injuries when I was insane and not eccentric. However, one of the reasons that my life took me in the direction it did is I needed to find an alternative because I couldn't do other things anymore. And eccentric exercise is the way to go. And what you'll actually notice is that physical therapists, personal trainers might not be super familiar with eccentric exercise. We could talk about why that is later, but physical therapists, and especially physical therapists that work with the elderly, are always, usually because they have PhDs, so they've actually done research. Anyone who has a PhD in exercise physiology is an expert in eccentric exercise because they've actually studied the research. But people who do physical therapy, they're super familiar with eccentrics. People who work with seniors are very familiar with eccentrics because they're so safe. They're so safe. So because they're slow, they're controlled, they're non-explosive, you're not changing directions. So if you can't put weight on your foot for whatever reason, yeah, you can definitely do the eccentric push-ups. You can do eccentric row type movements, not putting that weight on your foot, anything that's seated, really. So you can do essentially all upper body movements. And you definitely want to chat with your physician. But sometimes, depending on what your boot status is, you might be able, if you have access to a gym, to do things like leg extensions and then laying down leg curls. So these are your feet. You're like, so I hope no, after this call, they like put a weight on their finger and they're like, gosh, I'm really building up my finger muscles here. No. These are my little representation of your legs. So hopefully that is helpful.